Welcome to Hospitality Talks. This is Sam-Erik and here's my co-host Abid Butt. Really delighted to welcome you, and sorry about the slight delay. But we are here now, and with an even better show than ever. We have some great restaurateurs. We have some great design people who are joining us on this talk today. But before I ever start, I want to say a special best regards to Narinder in Bangkok, an old friend of mine. We're going back for many, many years, and I'm so proud that we have his son, Rohit, on our show today. But let me get over you to Abid to introduce the panel.
Thank you so much, Sam. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Hospitality Talks. It's great to have you back, whether you're joining us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. We've got a fabulous panel from some of the largest cities in the world, a panel of restaurateurs that have been in the business for quite a while. We will learn how the business has evolved, what things are being done differently, particularly in light of COVID-19. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring in our first guest, Rohit Sachdev, who is the CEO of Soho Hospitality based out of Bangkok. Rohit, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I know it's in the evening for you, so feel free to continue to enjoy your wine as we speak. We will be envious because we're starting our day.
Great.
Rohit, you've been in the business for 15 some odd years. You've seen ups and downs. Most of your restaurants at this particular point are in Thailand. Tell us how the business has evolved over this time period.
Do you mean in terms of in the last couple months? Are you in terms of COVID? Are we talking
overall the changes that you have seen in restaurant industry since the time you entered?
Okay. I got into the restaurant business before it became cool to be in restaurants. So I was kind of I started before everybody decided to get into restaurants. And Thailand is a country where Thais have a great palate for food. Thai food is a world-renowned cuisine. But when I had started, it was just at the cusp of the growth of the restaurant market in Bangkok. Traditionally, it was primarily run by mom and pop shops, and there were some chains, and it was quite fragmented. But fast forward to today, there's a lot of prominent restaurant groups that have formalized and established their presence in the market. It's a very, very competitive restaurant space, all the way from quick service restaurants to grab and go, casual dining, smart casual or social dining, which is the area where we tread, and fine dining. It's come a long way. And if you look at Thailand put itself on the world map with the restaurant Guggen, which was voted best restaurant in Asia by Asia's 50 best restaurants I think it was like 3 or 4 years in a row. And that really cemented Thailand as a travel destination for food. And we also had a growing middle class in the last 15 years. So there's a lot of disposable income. And if you look at the Thai demographic, Thai people, many of them don't have kitchens at home. So, even though they may be eating at home, they will buy food from outside and bring it home to eat. So there was a study done a while ago which looked at how many times people dine out, per month in the world. And I think China was first and Thailand came second in Asia. They are dining out at as many as, it was something about like 60 times a month Thais are dining out. And I don't think it really means that they're dining out, eating at restaurants, but maybe just like grabbing food on the streets, picking up their food in the plastic bags and taking it home and eating. But, Thailand is a very, very food-centric culture amongst the Thais itself, and then you have the expatriates, and then you look at the tourism market, which today is looking at about 38 to 40 million tourists coming to the country every single year, and that also feeds fuel to the local food market. So it's a very, very competitive market, but it's been a growing market. And Thais have an amazing palate for food. I mean, Thai people will travel hours to go and eat food, a particular noodle dish, or they will travel hours to go and eat. So it's a very sophisticated market. And as far as I'm concerned, looking at the Thai, look at Asia Pacific and Asia as a whole, I would say that Thailand has one of the best offerings in terms of food and beverage. Maybe it doesn't have the recognition. People always talking about Hong Kong and Singapore, I think because those markets are more mature. But if you ask me, I think Thailand is number one when it comes to food.
Well, I haven't lived in Thailand and spent a lot of time in Bangkok. Obviously, there are lots of new concepts that have been introduced from Bangkok. Not only from cuisine perspective, also from design elements and creating a fabulous concept. I would tend to agree with you. Thailand, particularly out of Bangkok, I would put that up against any other market, the likes of Hong Kong, Singapore, or Tokyo for that matter. So thank you for that insight. Now, Rohit, in 15 years, obviously the dining trends have evolved. People are looking for different things. For that matter, if you go back your time in New York, I'm sure you would recognize that people typically did not go into hotels to enjoy a meal. In Asia, it's still slightly different, even though independent restaurants are becoming huge. But people still do go to hotel restaurants to enjoy a meal. Tell us how the dining trends have evolved.
Well, with the proliferation of independent restaurants and independent restaurants, being able to deliver an amazing experience in terms of food, beverage, ambience, the independent restaurants have given the hotel business a run for their money. And back in the day, Thailand, if you look at it in the 80s, Thailand was very much a five-star travel destination. There were the Sheratons and the Hyatts, and there were all the, most of the hotels were five-star. And so a lot of us didn't have a lot of dining options. We used to go and dine in the five-star hotels. But today, a lot has changed actually, Abid. I wouldn't say that the hotels are still able to, are still doing well. In fact, they're actually being very much challenged by the number of independent restaurants that are coming into the market. And now they're still, they say like, I don't know, 3 out of every 4 are not surviving. I don't know what the statistics are in Thailand, but there's a lot of people who are getting into the business, some who don't understand the challenges of getting into the business, but some of them actually make it and are setting a precedent in terms of new concepts in the market because there's so much volume of new concepts coming into the market. So in fact, the hotels have been affected greatly by the number of independent restaurants that are giving them a run for the money. And secondly, if you look at consumer behavior and consumer ideology, a global traveler, and I don't think, if you look at consumer behavior ideology, there used to be a gap between the East and the West. Today, I really believe that ideology is almost gone. The thinking in terms of behavior, whether you're in New York or in Bangkok, is pretty much the same. And what's happening to the global traveler, whether they're Chinese, Singaporean, or from New York or London, they come to the hotel and they park themselves there. But because we're adventure seekers, we want to go and explore a city. We want to find out about, what's happening in that city. We end up sleeping at the hotel, having breakfast there, but we end up not eating at the hotel. We might have a drink there, but we want to go out and explore. We've become urban explorers. So no matter where you're in New York or Asia or in Europe, I think the consumer behavior and ideology is the same. And that's why today the hotel operators are being pressured by the owners. When it comes to rooms, it's plug and play. But when it comes to food and beverage, it's plug and pray. They're not able to deliver the kind of yields they can on the rooms that they're able to in terms of the food and beverage. And, the hotels are changing, they're evolving. I think you see that in New York City and London. They're bringing in independent operators. And I think the same thing is happening in Asia because the owners are saying, you're not delivering the yield, and they're putting pressure on the operators.
I think hoteliers, and I'm certainly one of them, as is Sam, having worked all over the world, I think hoteliers still tend to be very conservative, and we want to have somewhat of an old school. I personally went to a culinary school, and quite candidly, what I was taught at that time in the absolute do's and don'ts, they definitely do not apply today. Things have changed. The food trends have changed, and people's palates are evolved. Rohit, tell us, from a mix point of view, you tend to deal with the younger audience. How much of it is the residents in the local community versus the visitors for your restaurant?
So my restaurant group is a little bit different because I lived in New York City for 10 years. And when I came to Bangkok, I was going to create New York City, the New York City vibe in my restaurants. And that's what I did. I created a couple of, social dining restaurants, and I brought those concepts to Thailand. So generally, my concepts are very much expatriate driven. The biggest fans of my restaurants are my expatriates. And then because our restaurants and the branding and the public relations through word of mouth have transcended beyond our borders through TripAdvisor and through international publications, as well as all the travel publications such as Lonely Planet, where a lot of our establishments are on Lonely Planet. We ended up becoming very popular in terms of the travel demographic as well. So we went after the expats, and then the Thais came, and then the tourist demographic came. So my restaurants, some of them have been greatly affected by COVID because we tended to target the expats and the tourism demographic, but we do have a following amongst the Thai demographic as well, but the Thai demographic has always been lagging. Now, in terms of our quick service restaurant, we have a pizza brand called Soho Pizza. It's a New York pizza brand. That restaurant, we opened it catering it to the again, the expat and the tourism demographic, but we opened our first branch 20 kilometers outside the center of Bangkok, and it's been doing really well. So, we plan on expanding that quite aggressively, across Thailand. But generally, we've been targeting the tourism market and the expatriate market.
Rohit, this pivot to quick service was more recent for you. Tell me what brought that about. Do you find that one particular type of restaurant, whether it's quick service or casual dining or social dining, as you say, is the financial model better in one type of restaurant over the other?
Okay. So the first thing I learned during COVID was that, we need to diversify. And the fact that I was diversified across a number of different business, I'm really glad that we have different income streams coming to. When I look at the restaurant portion of our business, I'm very grateful now that I also had diversified. I have some casual dining. I've got some social smart, what I call social smart fun dining restaurants, kind of similar to the popular New York sort of dining scene restaurants. And then I got into the pizza game. And the pizza game, the pizza business is great for a number of reasons. First of all, you're dealing with, lower price points and, greater accessibility. Secondly, in terms of CapEx, it's a much lower CapEx for a particular outlet. And then the yield you can get is amazing. I mean, with some of our outlets, we're looking at a return on our investment in, you're looking at like anywhere between 3 to 4 months and maximum within a year. So, at this time where restaurants are facing, cash constraints and financial cash flow constraints, the pizza business is actually not only just saving us, but giving us the opportunity to generate more cash flows to help us compensate the loss of cash flows from the other businesses that were targeting the expats and the tourism demographic. So I'm really glad that we have that business. And in fact, we've got 3 Soho pizzas now. We've got 3 more. We're actually in an expansion phase with that business. I mean, who's building more? Who's opening more outlets? I mean, we are. We've become more opportunistic. We've got 3 more outlets opening up. And I just got a call by the big mall retailer, one of the big retailers today, saying that they've got 2 more sites to me, for me. And I'm going on Monday to see 2 more sites. And if I like them, I'm going to continue moving forward. So I think in some senses, we have to retract as a restaurant group, but on the other essence, I really think we also need to go on the offense. We need to be aggressive. We need to find ways to look at our business and see how we can become better. Because if we just stay flat-footed, I'm telling you, we're going to become worse off after this.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for that, Rohit, and I'm going to turn it over to Sam in a minute. But in markets like Bangkok, and you have gone into Bali and you are looking to go into Dubai, some of the very, very, very competitive markets on dining scene, how do you create a competitive advantage?
Look, when I created my brands, and I'm a brand creator, I run an interior design company. I create brands and restaurant and F&B concepts for some of the biggest companies in the world. I work with Minor, I work with Radisson, Marriott, Dusit, Anantara. I work with the real big brands. When I created my brands, I always created my brands so that I didn't create them for Bangkok. I created them so that I could bang my brands with any brand in the segment that I'm operating in, whether it was New York, London, Bangkok. And that was the brand, that was the promise. Now, I could say that, yes, my brands are good enough, but ultimately the consumer decides. The consumer decides whether my brand is good enough. And these are Thailand-created brands that were created by my own teams. And the fact that we got a call from Marriott saying, we want to take your brands to Dubai. I get calls from guys from Bahrain, Qatar saying, we want to take your Indian brand charcoal to Qatar. I've got calls saying, we want to take your restaurant charcoal to London. We're taking Havana Social now to, we are very confident that, we created brands that are all about 2 things. 1, about experience. The 2 is about authenticity, making sure our experiences are authentic. And thirdly, making sure that all of our experience tell a great story and connect emotionally to the customers that come into our places. And that's been always the fundamentals of how we built and created brands, the philosophy behind our brands. And I think that, today our brands speak for themselves, and the calls that we get to take our brands international makes us really proud. And we're really excited to be able to take Soho Hospitality and, be able to deliver those types of experiences. We're going to have to localize. We're going to have to learn every time we go into a different market about the ideologies and the behaviors of that market. But we're very confident that when we go into that market, we will bang on with the best brands that are, competing in the space that we do.
Well, brands are very emotive, and restaurants are all about experiences. So I think the 2 fit in very well together. Let me turn it over to Sam and I'll be back with you. Sam, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very interesting story you're telling about the different brands, and I'm particularly interested in the aspect of when you are creating restaurant or hospitality concepts. What are the things that inspires you when you go through that dream phase of thinking about developing something like that?
So the first thing I look at is I look at the gaps in the market. I look at, people always tell me Bangkok is overloaded with concepts and it's too competitive. But I always think there are gaps in the market. And the second thing I do is I look at, making sure, and I call it my 10 planets, right? I make sure that I work and once I come up with the concept, I work on the 10 planets to fulfill that concept. And it's interior design, lighting design, brand development, uniforms, tabletops, food, beverage, mixology, music, service. And I have a very talented team of people who are within my organization, as well as some amazing, lighting designers and uniform designers and, brand development consultants that I bring in as part of a virtual extension of my team to really, create that concept. And, the devil's in the detail. The restaurant business today is about the attention to detail. And you're going to be successful when you pay attention to all the little aspects of the attention to detail, which is what creates product differentiation and which is what eventually touches the emotions of the customers. And when you do that, you can sit back and you can watch the consumers using social media technologies to do the marketing for you. You do not need, we've never invested, in the last 3 or 4 years in PR companies. We've never put a single ad in any magazine publication, very, very seldomly. And we just let the consumers use the voice of the customer to drive the brand loyalty and the recognition of our products. And we're extremely reactive in terms of customer engagement on all those platforms. And I think if you create a great concept, the customers will do the marketing for you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm with you in 150% on that aspect, because right now it's the you don't own the brand, it's the customer that owns the brand, and they are the ones who will then are your brand ambassadors, if you will. But I'm interested, because it's a kind of tricky thing to develop concept. It basically can be a very sort of egoistic, well, this is what I think is very good, but at the end of the day, it's the customer who decides, is it good enough? What are the things that you're looking at with your antenna out when you're looking for your next thing in terms of concepts? What are the things you're listening into from the consumer?
I've got a cloud here, full of concepts that I'm waiting to execute. I think one thing that we can never control, which affects this in all industries, is timing. You have to make sure that you are, executing that project, that concept at the right time. And that's the one thing that we can't control. The second thing is, and everyone knows this on this chat, it's location, location, location. You have to really, really, really study. I opened a French restaurant in a location. It had the highest reviews, but I swear to God, I think there was a bad feng shui or whatever on that location, and it didn't work, and I lost a lot of money there. We're going to make mistakes, and we're going to have to take some risks. But I think that at the end of the day, I think once you're in your business and you've been in it long enough, whatever business you're in, you have to trust your instincts. You have to walk into that site. And with that, and when you walk in that site, you're inspired, and you walk around and you look at it, and you have a concept in mind, and you have to say, like, this is a site, and I know I'm going to go for it, and you have to go for it. And hopefully, the 80-20%, 80% of the time you're going to do okay, 20% of the time you're not, and the 20% is going to take a big hit, because when a place doesn't do well, it does take a huge hit on your, one place doesn't do well, it affects the P&L of the other, the other two places that are doing well have to sacrifice the place that's not doing well. And I've gone through that myself.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, you have to be very, very, instinctive, but you also have to be mindful that ultimately you're creating this for the demographic that you're doing it for, and you have to study, the consumer behavior ideologies of those particular demographics, because they're changing very, very fast. The way the consumers have evolved, and the way they think are changing very, very fast. But the great thing for our business is that no matter what, COVID or not, people want human interaction, and they're going to always go out for a drink or for food. And I don't care what's going to happen or how bad this pandemic gets. I think that things will come back to normal, and we're going to go back out to eat.
Yeah. Where do you pick up the signals when you are kind of tuning into what the changes in the customer needs or requirements, or what are your favorite channels where you are trying to hear that or see that signal?
So I'm a public speaker on consumer behavior trends, and I'm invited on a lot of talks to talk about consumer behavior ideology. And so I study a lot, and the demographic that I love looking at are Gen Zs and millennials. I study them to a T. And I was talking about this in my other chat and other talks too, and I was saying that there was a lot of anxiety amongst Gen Zs and millennials because they were coming into the world at a time in which there was climate change, right-wing movements, Donald Trump, the opportunity for them to buy and invest in, real estate, at a time in which when they're coming in, the price, it's going to take them generations to acquire assets. They were just coming into the world at a time when everything was bad. So what was happening was consumers were wanting to engage with brands that had a sense of purpose. They wanted brands that were going to have a sense of why. And this I was talking about the anxiety amongst this generation of consumers. I was talking about this before COVID, that they wanted to engage with brands that were going to make their lives better. Because imagine they have no future to look at today. My niece goes to university in London, and she's going to spend a year of her university life in Bangkok, doing classes through Zoom. That wasn't the life that we lived. And so there's a lot of anxiety about their future. And so they just wanted to engage with brands that were going to make their lives better. Let me tell you, now that COVID's come about, that's going to be multiplied 3 or 4x. And we all, as businesses, as restaurateurs, as corporations, as we try to navigate the future of what everybody's calling the new normal, the first question we're going to all have to ask each other is, why are we in business? And it can't be for profits. It has to be about because we're going to make lives of people better. We're going to make lives of the employees that we work better. We're going to make lives of the communities in which we serve better. And that has to come at the forefront of your stock price and of your profitability. And that's what's really, really changed.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. These are very lot of value that you're providing in this with this information. Let me hand over back to Abid, please.
One quick question, Rohit, before we bring in our next guest. Any particular changes that you having to implement when you're starting to reopen with the COVID still in place?
So the one thing I did is, here's the thing, and Abid, you and I talked about this the other day. Restaurants and hotels, we've never innovated. Tell me one, Airbnb came out from outside the hospitality business. OTAs and the technology to handle distribution came out from hospitality business. You ask a fellow restaurateur, do you have a technology that connects table management, reservation management, POS to accounting, CRM? And every restaurateur goes, no, we don't have that. We've never innovated in our industry. It's sad, but it's true. And that's why we've suffered. We've never, ever innovated. The hospitality industry and the restaurant industry has never been innovated. And we're very, very fortunate, many of us, because in the restaurant business, when you do well, you do really well. And now none of us are doing well. So we've gotten away with operating inefficiently for many, many years. But today, we no longer have that privilege. And for restaurants to be able to survive in this post-COVID environment, they're going to have to open the kimono and look in within their organizations and look in every aspect of their operational efficiency. And what we've done in our organization is we've come up with a benchmarking project where we're looking at all the various KPIs from financial, from the voice of the customer, operations, marketing, and we're really looking at all these KPIs in a very micro perspective so that we can make sure that when things come back to normal, and we know that the customers are not going to be there like we were before, that we're going to operate as efficiently as we can. And I think that's the message to all my fellow restaurateurs is that if we want to survive, we have to dig deep and look within our organizations. We have to invest in being operationally efficient, and we have to become tech companies that have a restaurant business. We're no longer in the business of operating food and beverage outlets. We're going to have to become tech businesses that are in the business of delivering food and beverage, and that's what I'm in the process of doing. It's super challenging because I'm having to connect all these apps that don't talk to each other, and that's the biggest problem of our industry. Nothing talks to each other, and nobody's out there. It's 2020, and there's not a single vendor out there who can make sure that all of our data is communicating and talking to one another, and at a time in which the data currency is king. So it's
well. Thank you for that, Rohit. It is a challenge, and quite candidly, some of that challenge we all take responsibility of it, because most of the people in hospitality industry tend to be technophobes. It's a thin margin business. We always wait for the next guy to use it, and based on what his successes and failures, we'll take it on. So hang in there. There are lots of other questions. We will come back to you. I'm going to bring on our next guest from New York, James Mallios, Managing Director of Amali Restaurant Group. James, welcome to Hospitality Talks. James, I think you're still muted.
Thank you so much for having me. I guess I'm proving your technophobe comment true.
Well, James, you have had a tremendous pivot, a lawyer, an attorney turned restaurateur. What is more difficult? Is it the law practice was more difficult, or is it the running a restaurant is tougher?
I like to joke that if I billed this many hours when I was an attorney, that I'd be running Walk-Tel. Minus that I'm not smart enough. But certainly on the billables.
Well, now you have restaurants that are independent. You have restaurants that are attached to hotel buildings. And a little bit that I do know about your operating model, you tend to look at each individual location and brand it independently. So tell us a little bit about your philosophy of independently positioned versus branded versus location.
Sure. So for us, I think the primary principle that defines every deal for us is the real estate. End of story. If the real estate is not there, if the deal is not right on the real estate, we don't take it, no matter how attractive or exciting or interesting the possibility may be. And because the structure of the real estate deal drives the restaurant, we don't go in with certain brands and say, aha, this is the brand I'm going to put in this place. We first find the real estate deal, and then the brand follows from that deal. So we do not have any either we own the property, or we have a variety of less than arm's length relationships with the landlord in a variety of forms. So I think that's the driving force of how we think about restaurants, and that's influenced by my partner, who's sort of that classic New York story of the Greek immigrant that can do, math on a napkin faster than a calculator, and I think that in this moment in time, maybe it's because I'm a lawyer and I'm generally in a very risky business. I'm weirdly risk adverse. I think that in this environment, that principle has proven very valuable.
Now, you in spite of the fact that as you have said, that a lot of the Greek immigrants coming to U.S., their families wanted to keep the kids out of food industry, and here you are. You took a turn and you're back into food industry. How has your family accepted you with making that change?
After my mom stopped crying, she she said that she made me promise that I would always, every 2 years, pay New York State and keep my license. So even now, 15 years later, every January I'm in front of a computer with 7 screens, keeping my license, running my CLE credits. Yeah, so it's so yes, you hit the nail on the head there. It did not go over well initially.
Well, in some ways I can relate to that, and I'll share that story with you off air. James, tell us what attributes do you focus on in making sure that the restaurants that you are opening and operating are indeed successful? You talked about real estate deal, and I take that's mostly from location in the lease or the ownership aspect of it. But what other elements do you think is the public looking for in a restaurant that makes a restaurant successful?
Sure. I think that I was really interested and inspired by what Rohit was saying about how he looks at brands, and we started focusing on that more recently. But for us, or for me, I should say, for us, it's the labor. It's our colleagues, and we have a stunningly low, shockingly low attrition rate, actually. So much so that I wish we had a higher attrition rate sometimes. There's some people I might prefer if they moved on, but I can actually count on one hand in the last maybe 7 years how many people have come into the office and said to a manager that they were leaving to work at another restaurant in New York City. Not like I'm leaving to, get married, I'm moving to Florida, I'm not counting that. In fact, I can't even remember the last time it happened, actually.
I think
so. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
No, I was going to say that is very unique, particularly to the restaurant industry in a market like New York, because typically food service industry has a massive turnover. So hats off to you that you've been able to do that. And I'm going to turn it over to Sam here in a little bit. Tell us some of the unique requests that you might have gotten initially when you were starting out in this business, from a very sort of a stiff collar environment of a law office to going into a restaurant where the guy wants to have ketchup on his, tenderloin steak. How did you transition, and how did you deal with that?
Well, I went, when you're a lawyer, you probably try to keep people out of prison. And I went to a work environment where I worked with a lot of people who had been to prison. The Hamptons is probably the best example of that. In the beginning, when we came here, some of the clientele was extremely challenging. And in the beginning, I would take the attitude that one should not reward bad behavior. One should not reward rudeness. But the way my lawyer sort of training has affected me over the 3 years we've been here is now 3 years later. Some cases are not worth litigating, and they ultimately are a waste of time and resources. So instead of taking the position that we would reward bad behavior now when there's a difficult situation, we just simply say, you know what, we're not the restaurant for you, and we wish you a wonderful evening, and there is no check. And have a wonderful evening. So I guess learning, the wiser lawyer probably knows when to litigate and when to settle, and that's certainly one thing that I've taken with me to the restaurant business. Even though I don't always look for myself, but lawyers lawyers are their own worst clients.
Well, I think that's a great way to connect the dots between two entirely different lines of work. So let me turn it over to Sam here. Sam, over to you.
Yes, I'm curious about the type of concept and restaurants that you are operating. What are the sort of generational differences what customers are looking for? Has there been a shift of taste or requirements in terms of menu items that they are looking for, or are you or people are just committed to the type of Mediterranean cuisine that you are offering, which I consider actually quite healthy? But what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. I think that we generally make restaurants, and I've several junior partners that I've cut into the business, and they're millennials. And let's say I don't know what generation I am. I guess X. And the way we approach it is we try to design a restaurant that we would like to go to ourselves in the neighborhood that we are in. So we try to see ourselves as aspirational neighborhood restaurants, and that's how we analyze it. So I wish I could say it was more scientific than that. I wish I could tell you that we study various market analysis, but we feel that we just want to create an organic place that we appreciate as diners, and so far it seems to resonate with people. So that's how we do it.
Okay, and can you then expand a little bit on the operating model when you go into, let's say, a new site? What makes you decide on what particular operating model you go in with?
Sure. Can you be a little more when you say operating model?
When you're like own lease or you manage.
Oh, got it. Okay. So we do not, as a general rule, take any lease straight out. We just won't do it, no matter how good the lease is. So our current deals are structured in either management agreements where the landlord is an investor in the restaurant or is on both sides of the deal, or we have a property interest in the space. So that means that we don't expand as aggressively as other situations. But like, for example, we are also opening probably, my partner's think I'm crazy, which is probably true on many levels. But we're actually also opening up a restaurant in probably in 2 or 3 months. We're the only person who actually picked up a restaurant in the middle of COVID because one of our real estate developer partners had asked us to step in where another operator had sort of refused to play ball. So that's, I think, for us it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Are the restaurants in the central business district, or are they in the residential?
All over. So we do have a principle. I mean, we do have another principle that we should try to have different streams of income or different income sources that we perceive to be legitimate. So Amali is in the middle of a business district in a high-end residential neighborhood. The Hamptons is in a seasonal and also a high-end vacation area. The Rockaway is an up-and-coming neighborhood with a large development, but also a population of local residents. And what I should say on the model, we do, like, for example, we just eliminated tipping, essentially, in New York, which so far, at least for a week, has gone well. We beta tested it last year. So we do change operational models probably a little bit differently than others.
Yeah. In those environments, working environments which are in the central business district, now there's a trend, particularly now with COVID-19, that people are working from home. And do you see that as now looking forward, that this is going to have an impact on how you operate your restaurants?
Yeah. So I'm an Occam's razor type of guy. I think generally people. I was here for 9/11. I was here for 2008. People are jerks. They go back to being jerks. Life in the same nature is nasty, brutish, and short, and it will return to that way. So, for example, when people say they're never going back to the office, I hear that, and that makes really good copy. I bet you those people do not have 4 and 8-year-olds, which I have, and everyone I know with 4 and 8-year-olds can't wait to go back to the office. I also think it's a lot easier to say that the world is different and no one will go back to the office when there's nowhere else to go during the day. That makes working from home a lot easier when there's nowhere to go. So wait till that first analyst goes to a bar and sleeps in for the meeting in the morning and see what the managing director says the next day about people not being in the office. Or think about the first client that gets visited when Goldman sends a team and all of a sudden every other bank says, oh my God, Goldman's sending someone, get on the plane. So I don't think that, I think there will be differences. But I hate to say it, it will be like the way we take off shoes at the airport now is our last vestige of what happened in 2001. That's what I think the difference will be.
Yeah, I mean, there are many.
Over time.
Many people are saying that one other thing is that we have a very short memory, that we usually go back to the way we were, with what we are used to and what we consider to be the normal way. So, yeah, I can relate to that. Good. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, thanks. Well, back to you, Abid.
So, James, you never really did shut your restaurants down. You were operating, though we weren't allowed to serve in. Mostly was takeout. Tell us how that worked out. That segment of business mix, do you think it'll be around for a while, particularly in Mediterranean type cuisines? Do you think you'll grow that more? Tell us how that whole takeout component worked.
Sure. So we have a tale of two cities in that regard. In the Hamptons, it was very successful, and we ended up doing delivery, which is rarely done out here. And the connection we made to our customer base, and the empathy and the goodwill that we engendered beyond just the profitability was really astounding. For Amali, which frankly is maybe one of the worst locations you can have in this type of crisis, it was an anemic. No matter what we threw at it, nothing. You get a little blip that went higher, but nothing really changed the dial consistently. But I think to what I think Rohit was saying before, we did make the decision to go on the offensive. So when the riots happened, we had to close Amali because curfew, etc. So after doing that, we said, you know what? We've got 2 weeks, 3 weeks that we can be closed, and no one's going to look bad. No one's going to cast an eye. Let's fix the HVAC on the second floor that has always never worked properly. Those floors that we know will need fixing in 2 years, let's do it now. Let's reface that thing that really could kind of be a little sexier and a little bit better. So whether it's Sun Tzu or George Washington or Rohit, I would say that we also chose to go on the offensive and take the time. Exactly, right? Act like you're going to be open or fucking lay down, right? Actually, you can't see it here, but the Spartan expression is Ithani Epitas, which means come back with your shield or on it. So either go down fighting or don't go down, or just don't bother coming home. So we've taken that attitude at Amali. So we've tried to take that lack of takeout business there and turn to a positive.
So, James, in U.S. at least, the government had extended some, I guess, help. I don't know if you availed yourselves of that. I don't know if you have a thought whether it works or it doesn't work. I've heard some good stories. I've heard some nightmares. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So I'm actually in a claims article for fighting J.P. Morgan Chase because they weren't following a Treasury Department guideline, and they actually reversed their position on the PPP loan that we had, an addendum that we had applied for. So I'm actually intimately familiar with this, and one of my partners is a former Goldman mortgage broker, so we probably think about it more than we should, frankly. What I can say is that, look, it helps, yes, and it definitely helps now that they've changed the timeline. But still, look, Mnuchin's a smart Goldman guy, right? The government's making out just okay on that loan. It's not as rosy as everyone thinks it is. So, but that being said, it's I don't want to kick a gift horse in the mouth and say that it definitely helps, but it's not a panacea solution.
Fair enough. I mean, at least it's an option, particularly now that some of the conditions have changed. It is Correct. Certainly an option for people that it fits with them. So hopefully that'll work.
Yeah, the 8 week was a killer. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Sorry to interrupt.
Nope. One last question before we bring our next guest on, James. Moving forward, what does growth look like for you? How do different or alternative revenue streams contribution is for your organization?
So what we did, which we just started in the Hamptons, and we're going to bring it to New York, even though it's a technical violation of the consumer protection laws, but that's what you get for being a lawyer, is you're more inclined to ask forgiveness than permission, is that we are basically telling customers that there's no tipping necessary. We're levying an 18% administrative fee on the check, and If they want to tip it, they're really just compelled to do it. Think about like if you're in Europe or somewhere else, you want to leave a little bit, that's fine. And we're moving to a wage structure that, like anywhere else in the world, where you can pay people based on seniority, merit, tenure. And we believe that change will provide a level of efficiency. And by reallocating that 18% or 20% that effectively goes to subsidize a socialist sort of structure with tipping, that we can reallocate those resources to have less people, be more efficient and higher paid, and do a better job for our customers. So that's the innovation, the major innovation that we're taking on.
Wait, that particular in Asia, it's called service charge, and it's very common. We had it in the hotels, in the restaurants, and I must tell you, there are two schools relative to that, whether that helps the service attitude or it hurts it. But at least there is a way to help the associates make additional money, and you can pay people properly. So thank you for sharing that. James, hang in there. We'll be right back with you. There are other questions, but at this particular point, I'm going to bring in our next guest, Jason Wischoff, who is the managing director of Benihana's. Welcome to Hospitality Talks, James.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be on board.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Now, you look after Benihana's pretty much everywhere other than U.S. and in a brand that has been around for 56 some odd years. Tell us how that component of Japanese cuisine has evolved over this time period.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to give and raise my hat, take my hat off to the founder himself, who was Rocky Aoki. He was a maverick, an entrepreneur spirit in mind. Landed in New York in 1964 and decided to open his first branch on the 56th Street in Manhattan. And that was just a table with 4 chairs. And effectively, he turned the whole Japanese culinary cuisine, which most people, in all fair and honesty, actually saw it as raw food. But here he was, actually with a grill, and now cooking hibachi, which is teppan style, knocking up all sorts of things from chicken, shrimp, and steak, to flipping and doing all sorts of acrobatic experiences and animations for the guests sitting down.
Now, obviously, Japanese cuisine is far more sophisticated. It is a far wider spread today than it would have been 50, 60 years ago. Has the food trends within that cuisine evolved? I know that Benihana's typically does the teppanyaki food. Have you stayed very consistent over that time period? Are you pivoting? Are you changing things in any way?
Yeah, I mean, like I guess, and I think, like Rohit sort of alluded on a number of different key areas that, when you're creating something, you've got to see what the market is there to aspire to deliver to. And even if you are a branded chain, you have to look at things, what you need to do outside the box, but that it doesn't slightly take it too much off you, but it actually brings it and aligns it to something which is traditionally Japanese, but you just need to introduce another dish of some form that will merit to something that you have existing. So, teppan style, hibachi style cuisine, is very much famed along the founder's cuisine of, Rocky's Choice and, many other merits to his home specialities that he would normally cook. But, we had to introduce other merits to our menus, which had to include the things of sashimi, sushis, and then bring in things such as black cod. And these are things that have evolved over time that, as consumer sentiment changes and they have the taste buds for Japanese food, they want to taste a variety of different food items that is incorporated within a Japanese culture.
Jason, unlike Rohit or James, whilst they have brands, truly a brand like Benihana that has been around for such a long time, tell us what benefits do you see in being associated with that brand, and your stakeholders when you're dealing with them. What are the challenges dealing with your stakeholders and combined with a brand that has been around for such a long time?
So when you just to interpret on the associated, can you just maybe just elaborate on that side a little bit, Abid?
Well, you are obviously representing that brand globally. When you deal with people, the stakeholders, your franchisees, for example, what do they like about the brand? What do they want to change? How has that process been?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, obviously, there's two sides of the business. So one is that we, as much as there's a brand consistency globally across Benihana, the states run independently, and we have the global rights outside of that, and also excluding South America. Love and passion has evolved from the states, and as you've seen, it's become a chain. Whereas if you look on this side of the pond, it's very much become a restaurant, but not many people know that it's a chain. And with that, it's been the people that, or the entrepreneurs or business people or people that own hotels or own restaurants or entrepreneurs who are looking to find other ways of driving, another line of business. It could be in the food business. Look at options such as Benihana. We'll look for a branded product that can deliver value, consistency across its chain of restaurants that so exist globally. And with the growth that we've seen exponentially internationally, that's purely come from the American market of what they've seen and like, and the popularity that's caused and given comfort to each business owner in their own country, knowing that this is of value that can be brought to that particular country in question. And as I say, there is a fixed brand standard to this. It's been studied intently and intensely through Harvard. There's been a lot of theories that have been placed via Benihana in terms of how it works systematically, and that it can drive bottom line, and that's what it does very well.
Hey, Jason, I'll turn it over to Sam here in a bit, but one last question for me at this particular point: how do you operate a teppanyaki restaurant while we're trying to live with COVID? Unlike some of the other concepts that can move out and do outdoor dining, moving the the grill outside is a bigger challenge. You have to keep physical distance, but yet the whole theatrics involved in a restaurant like Benihana's. How do you combine the two and be able to operate it?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at this over the last few weeks because, whilst in shutdown, we have to analyze the best formula going forward so that, we do mock-ups and we understand exactly the mechanics of that, and we follow the guidelines, specifically for, our model in London, which is, they're our own equity stores. So we actually lease these stores. And then we have predominantly all our other Benihanas across Europe, Middle East and Asia are all franchised. And just to take that back one step, as much as Benihana is a standalone restaurant, it's owned by an Asian group company called Minor International. And with them, they are a specialist in food and beverage with over 2,500 restaurants. And then they also have the hotel side with 600 odd hotels that they have, together with a lifestyle division that incorporates many retail lifestyle clothing and other accessories that they supply through their retail division in Thailand. But coming back to the Benihana, on an asset-light basis, we are the flagship in London to drive that global growth. So effectively, the lease structure that we have in London is to ensure that we can create the best measures and guidance for anything that we're looking to do as a product innovation that will be out for the next stage of Benihana life form. So we have a team of operations, procurement, development on food, and executive chefs consistently looking at other ways on how they can, to the best ability, not veer Benihana in different directions, but to keep it aligned for the next 10 to 15 years. So from our side, looking at the COVID-19, in terms of the practice and in terms of how it's set up, it's quite comforting for a guest or a customer that wants to come into our restaurants, because there is a distancing already in place, because the tables are set in a way where in formats where it's seated by 10 or 12 people, but it's 2 tables set with the chef in the middle, but then you can have 2 chefs serving 2 tables. The distances of those are just under 2 meters, but then if you look at the other side of the coin, where you have 2 tables to one side, then they're still a good 2 meters apart. Some restaurants vary, but in whole, it's very much the same. So we know that food being cooked in front of the customer is being cooked at 200 degrees. So we know that will kill off any germs instantly. So the logistic comes around, and the flow is how the staff are, moving around the restaurant, typically looking at guests, because obviously we run in volumes of people coming through the door. At any one time throughout a week, we'll probably have more than 1,000 people coming through in London, in Piccadilly alone. So we've had to look at measures and controls on how we serve, on how that flow is when guest goes to the gents, and how you make sure that they sanitize themselves. We've now introduced sanitizers on trolleys, so that the chefs can, as part of the animation, can give sanitizers to the guests so that they can clean their hands, and ensuring that everything is smooth across the way, and giving comfort at each step of the way to the guests, knowing that they're in a safe environment, a branded product that will go over and beyond normal practices.
So on the trolley, in addition to the different herbs and spices and ingredients, now we're going to have hand sanitizer, different fragrances of hand sanitizers that we can offer to the guests. Thank you, Jason. Let me turn it over to Sam here in a bit.
Sure.
Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Abid. Very interesting, Benihana. I have some fond memories about Benihana. I remember going in Chicago. It was 1978 was the first time I went to a restaurant where they had this animation. So I still remember it like yesterday. So it clearly is a concept has created a lot of imagination for when I was looking at different restaurants. And over the years, I must have been going to one Benihana in Bangkok, and Dubai with my wife. So we have done few, and there's also the great consistency of what Benihana is doing. What I'm interested in, because my visits has mostly been as a visitor to a city, except in Dubai where I lived. But how is the split or between residents visiting your restaurant as a patrons, or patrons or visitors, out of town visitors?
Yeah, we know our key market, the key feeder market is the US, because obviously it's the chain, and that's given the popularity that whenever whether an American citizen's coming in for business or pleasure, being anchored. So there's 3 sides to our business model. One is we can work independently within a hotel space, but we like to have visual frontage, so that it can be seen that there is a Benihana in Europe, and then we have those that you have on shopping malls. So as you walk in, so if you went to in Asia, in Bangkok, you would find the Benihana inside a shopping mall together with Jakarta. And then we have standalone, so effectively completely standalone restaurants that run independently on a franchise basis. What we typically and how we typically like the Benihanas is that we like to be surrounded by all components, whether it's residential, tourist, and office workers, because in this business of Benihana, it's not about going and sitting down as a couple. It can be, and it can be accommodated, but it's more about sharing those experiences and having a great time. A deal's been concluded. It could be a birthday, and we want to be able to open those doors wide for those guests coming in 4, 5, 10 people, bookings for even more, and to give them the experience that they'll never forget, and they know they can keep coming back to that same experience, although it could be another tap-hand chef who will come up with some form of a different magical or animated trick, but to give them the consistency of the animation and the experience that they'll always remember at Benihana.
Great. How is it then lunch compared to dinner? Is Benihana more of a after-work place for dinner, or is it also a popular place for lunches? And would that mean that, for instance, the out-of-town visitors might be enjoying the lunchtime, or what are your thoughts on the split in timing of enjoying your restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, guest seasons vary. So if you look, if I take UK as a measure, if we look at UK, you tend to have the half-term periods, which families love to come in with their children and enjoy a great evening or a lunchtime trade. Typically we have two well-located Benihanas. So we have one in Piccadilly and one in Chelsea. And just focusing on London for a minute, but if you look at Chelsea, it's more of an affluent family location, but a lot of international. It's quite an international hub for the people that live there. So that whether they work in banks, but very high-end type work, they will congregate in Chelsea, and they always want to stay in Chelsea as a location within London. For those that are looking for the West End and going into retail hubs where there's lots of promotions going on, or you're going to Piccadilly, but then we have a close proximity to Mayfair that is for the fund managers. So that caters for a different market as such. So what we do find is that, yes, there are half terms for the children, there's summer terms for the children. That within that, then you have birthday parties. Within those, you have office workers who would tend to come in for lunch or dinner trade. But most of our generating revenue is typically coming out from an evening menu.
Right. Just interested in your menu. Over the years, what are the changes that you have seen? What's on the offerings on Benihana's menus? You mentioned sushi and sashimis, for instance. You mentioned the black cod, but is there anything else? Are there something demands or requirements from the younger adults that they're looking for something else which has not been seen in a typical Benihana restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have all the raw fish, so we tend to upsell a lot of our sushis and nigiri and hashimi because we know that the hibachi will come in later, so that's pretty much given as starters. But what we have found is that Wagyu in general has been a bigger seller for us.
Okay.
And I guess it denotes the Japanese steakhouse, but also that it's quite a rare meat to have had. If you look at the Kobe meat that traditionally came out from Japan, I mean, it's not something that we can sell every day because there's a limited supply of that meat. Yeah. But now abundantly you can get it through the US and you can get it from Australia. But the Wagyu itself, it certainly appealed very much so to the Middle Eastern society because obviously the Wagyu in generally can come in as a halal.
Yes.
So they're probably our biggest market feeder outside the US that love what we do as a Japanese steakhouse to deliver the food and quality, consistency that they can have anywhere in the world, knowing that they can have halal food just the same.
Yeah. As I remember from Benihana's that you have, at least I remember in Chicago, when a because it's such a vivid memory, your drink lists. You had some very innovative glassware that you were serving your drinks from. Is that, you still have that in Benihana? Is it something that you have also developed in through the years?
Absolutely, and we have a lot of signature cocktails, as well as the sakis, all the special ones, together with Japanese whiskey, and very popular.
Okay.
Very popular on the cocktails, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to probably downsize our menu coming in on post-COVID, just to not to overstock, but just to ensure that we have the right ones and the best-selling ones that we will continue selling.
Very good. Now, just my final question is: when you're looking at new locations for a great brand like Benihana, what are you looking for? Central business district or high-end residential areas? What are your strategy for your pipeline for the future?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we need to be in good high footfall, traffic locations where, there is an anchor on all sides. That you have tourism coming in, so there's, that there are demand generators from hotels. It could be meeting event space. It could be, touristic locations, but we don't need to be on the face of everyone to see us. So effectively, if I took Times Square, I wouldn't want to be on the face of Times Square. I would probably sit one block behind Times Square. And it's the same in London. If you look at Piccadilly Circus, we are one block back from Piccadilly Circus on a side street, but we are, very close vicinity to, Le Méridien, the Ritz, many great hotels that are alongside us, together with a lot of great retail, whether it's from clothing to restaurants, but we are giving guests different choices. And I think, from a group such as Benihana, there is no one that will compete as equal to what we do as Benihana. Yes, there's many Japanese restaurants that probably go finer, but nothing on the sort of mid-scale basis to where we would position ourselves in the UK. So that's typically is understanding the demographics of those locations when I travel in places like Europe, and to see where those demand generators are, and understanding from the ownership, that he understands that what we want from a branded product and what we know from our experience in many Benihana locations on how we can drive and make it a successful, relationship between, a franchisor and a franchisee. We would have to conduct many analyses and many research to ensure that with all the demand generators are met and ticked, that we are comfortable that it can be a successful business. Because, Benihana, you typically walking into a 10, 15 year, 20 year agreement. And the last thing we want is that, we're not going to get a chain of Benihanas going into Rome by the dozens. We want to open one very good one or two at best, because it, constitutes a lot of floor space. You've got to have anything between 600 to 800 square meters of floor space to make this profitable.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you very much.
Every day you can find a Teppan chef, so it takes a long time to train them.
Yes, I can imagine. Well, thank you very much, James. We appreciate it. And over to you, Abid.
Sam, thank you. I think we are really at the tail end of it. Quite candidly, we've run a little bit over. So if it's okay, let's bring everybody back together for one last round of questions, if that works, because I know everybody is pressed for time. So James, I know that you need to run, but just a quick question. In the world of food network generation, if I may use that, how do you bring consumers back to your restaurants? And James, I'll start with you. I think we might have a bit of a disconnect with James, so let me pose that to Rohit.
I'm opening my restaurants today, actually. Two of my restaurants are opening today. You know what I said to my staff? I told them, treat every single customer that comes today like you've never treated them before. And I think that in the end of the day, personalizing that experience. It was always what we should have done. So if we weren't doing this before, we should have been in the business. But more so than ever, every single person that comes through our doors is worth 3 or 4x what he used to be, because we've lost, 50 to 75% of our customers. So I told them, everyone who comes into our restaurant today, give them something special. Whether it's a dessert, a drink, or an extra dish, give it. Because we need to build loyalty. We need to thank these people for coming back. And we need to make sure that we continually understand that without these customers and their loyalty, that we won't have a business. We can't fund anything, whether it's our restaurant, restaurant direct costs or the cost of our shared services. And I've got a huge shared services cost for my, that are run through my central management corporate teams. The restaurants feed all of that. So, it's really about knowing your customer, and we're implementing technology so that we have better understanding of what our customers' preferences are, so that we can preempt what they want before they want it. And that's what builds great customer service and loyalty. And that's what wins at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Look, I think we have run out of time, so let's try to wrap it up. We always wrap it up with feel-good stories and something personal that you can share. And James, I know you need to run because we're running a little late. So if you don't mind, let me ask you any good stories that you can share, anything personal that you might have learned during this time, or anything that you have noticed in the industry, uplifting stories. James.
Yeah, of course. I made the joke earlier about Thomas Hobbes and life being nasty, brutish, and short, but I was really candidly very overcome by how generous and supported many of our customers were. And what I saw, there's a parable in the New Testament about a widow giving like 2 coins because that's all she had. And I know so many restaurants who are in New York who are in the worst of circumstances, and we're making efforts to give food away to people who are in even more dire circumstances. So I really did. As much as I joke about it, I saw the best of. That's why our city is the fucking best. Because that's the Bangkok or anywhere else, that New Yorkers are somehow really difficult, but somehow when the chips are down, New Yorkers really know how to help each other out when it counts.
Yeah. I'm a New Yorker. I went to NYU. I lived in New York for 10 years. I'm a New Yorker all the way. I would not be where I am right now in the restaurant business if it wasn't for the amazing restaurants and hospitality and food and beverage scene in New York City, which inspired everything I do. So I'm with you all the way. New York's #1.
Thanks.
Awesome. Rohit, since you have the camera, anything you would like to share really quick, some uplifting story or anything personal that you might have learned?
2 things. I told someone the other day who looked at me and said, "Oh my God, what happened to your business?" I said to him, "COVID was the best thing that happened to me." And he looked at me like, "What the hell?" When COVID happened, I got my teams on like 10 innovation projects, looking at all the shortcomings and all the areas we need to improve, all the things that we can't fix when businesses is going because we're so focused on the business. And I had all my teams working really hard on those 10 innovation projects. And today I'm already seeing those innovation projects coming into practice that are going to make us better going forward than we were before COVID. My second thing, and I really agree with what was said earlier, we tend to overreact. My GM was telling me he wants to put, we own a hotel here too. My GM was like, I'm putting like masks in every room. I've got this we're going to spend $10,000 so that we have contactless entry into the elevators. And he showed me all these projects. I cut all of them. At the end of the day, we all want human interaction. We all hate wearing masks. None of us like wearing masks. Nobody wants to eat at a table with a plastic in front of them. And I don't care how bad things are, and I'm not trying to, I know a lot of lives are lost, and I'm not trying to depreciate the impact of the pandemic. But at the end of the day, we want to interact with people. We want to go out and drink. We want to go to restaurants. We want to travel and explore and see the world. And I think that we're overreacting. We have to be cautious. We don't want a second resurgence of this pandemic, which will affect our industry. We should be cautious. But I'm not about to overreact and make investments in things that take away, us from what we want to do, which is to be together, enjoy life, explore the world, go and eat great food, go to the great establishments of the people who are here on this chat. I'm dying to go out and eat out at their establishments. I don't think that's going to change. And I do believe, I was at the Marriott in Hua Hin, which is 2 hours from here. It was packed last weekend. Nobody was social distancing. Now, that could be because Thailand didn't hit Thailand as hard. We only had, 50 deaths, 3,000 cases. But at the end of the day, like I said before, I really believe that we all want human interaction. And, I'm dying to go out to a restaurant and dine and hang out, with my friends and eat again. And I want to be in a social environment. And I think things will come back to normal. That's my prediction.
Thank you so much, Rohit. That's great. Last but not least, Jason, anything personal that you can share, anything that you might have noticed in the industry?
Yeah, I think from my side, it's just been really overwhelming because obviously since we had the lockdown, and obviously businesses realizes that that there is no trade that could be had because restaurants can't trade. They've really gone way and above and beyond, catering for the NHS staff, which is government supported hospitals, because they're on the lockdown, supermarkets were pretty much running out of everything. And they couldn't feed the key workers, having worked 12, 18 hours a day, then going home or trying to get into a shop to buy something, and everything had run out because everyone's gone, they've gone in a panic mode and literally buying everything they could buy off the supermarket, more so including toilet rolls, to try to cover from them over this period. And chefs came out and they decided to open some of those kitchens and supplying now today up to 12,000 dishes a day. I mean, it's incredible where it's gone. I mean, it really goes to show the support and charity that we can all do getting together, when we have to hold hands together and try and support our nation.
Well, thank you, Jason. And gentlemen, please do share these stories on #HospitalityHeroes because it is really, really important that we continue to recognize. Closing on my side, thank you, Jason, James, and Rohit for joining the conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for sharing different perspective from different markets. I'm sure our viewers would enjoy learning from you guys. Let me turn it over to Sam for closing. Sam.
Thank you, Abid.
Yeah. Thank you very much again for the great panel discussion from New York, Bangkok, and London. It was really great to connect with you, and also that you shared your views and valuable information to all the viewers. I'd like to thank all the live viewers who joined us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Now, if you'd like to see some future of our episodes, just press subscribe, and then there's also for YouTube there's a bell. If you could press that bell, you will be also informed when we are going live. But also I'd like to thank all the replay viewers, because I know that many didn't have a chance to watch us live, but they are going to look at our episodes later. And if you have any comments or questions from what you saw or heard, please write down in the comments, and then we will address them as we can. So from my side, just thank you very much again, and please look out for our next episode.